Well, everybody, we are about to find out if the NFL really wants to make a statement about concussions. We're about to find out a lot, I think. We're about to find out if the NFL meant all the things in the public service ads that you see 2 or 3 in practically every single game about safety, about the equipment. We're about to find out if they really meant all that stuff about protection and concussion protocols and things like that. We're about to find out if the NFL will stand by its statements in a landmark concussion case in which the NFL settled with former players. The original ruling, just to let you know, the original ruling, actually, the judge came back and said, well, that's not enough money. For whatever reason, the players accepted, I think it was under $1 billion. The final settlement was well over $2 billion. We can debate that too. But we're about to find out if they meant the statements that they made in that case. We're about to find out a lot about the NFL and the acceptance. I think this is pretty important too. The threshold and the acceptance of parents of boys playing football. It's something in all of this to watch. Reaction to parents, participation rates in football, stuff like that. I think it's worth chatting about. I do. I think people will react. The big question for all of you, how much, if anything, will change? And then I think I can do a decent job of putting you in the spot of being a 26-year-old, feeling bulletproof. This is what I've done my whole life. Why should I quit kind of mentality? Because I think it's really, really easy for all of us to stand around today and say, my gosh, I'd quit. Yeah, but we have a perspective at 35 and above that there's no way when you're in the middle of the peak of your career, of your craft, money too, but it's the peak of your craft and you feel good about it. You're mastering, well, that's debatable, but you feel like you've mastered your craft and all of a sudden the world is saying you got to quit and you feel fine. It's really easy to say, oh, I'd quit. It's not quite as easy as you think. I will tell you at a high level of football, as I've said numerous times now about concussions, and I know them all too well, that they're doing all they can. They really are. An effort is made at most levels of football. Sadly, I think at some young levels, it's terrifying. But the effort has been there. You can't keep running into people, particularly if you've had concussions before, and not keep suffering concussions. The Miami Dolphins quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, was concussed again. One of the ways I don't know if you've heard this, and it's pretty grotesque, but this is coming from a guy that's had multiple concussions, then they say this to you. Not that you can see yourself in that moment, but one of the ways that you know that somebody has been concussed and severely concussed, even when it seems like a routine hit, which says a lot about this. When you're concussed, one or both arms stick out briefly. I know that sounds awful, but I think neurologists call it a fencer's pose. You hit the ground and an arm will come out. And I'm sorry, but look for it. Look for it. You may hate knowing that, but it's a real thing. You could see that with the Dolphins quarterback last night. This is at least the third time in about a 2.5-year period that he's been concussed. The Dolphins were blown out, by the way, at home by the Buffalo Bills. He threw 3 interceptions. Now tell me one thing. Tell me I'm not the only person that noticed the bizarre circumstance between the Bills and the Dolphins and the hit that Tua Tagovailoa took. Okay, listen to this. Surely people have now talked about this or noticed this. Do you know who hit him on that play? Do you know who made that tackle? And it wasn't a brutal tackle. It wasn't a brutal hit. It wasn't illegal by any stretch. It was perfectly normal. You'd see it, 60 times a game. Do you know who hit him on the play that led to his concussion? A perfectly routine tackle. The player that made the tackle was Damar Hamlin. How weird is that? The very player brought back to life on a field a couple of years ago in a nationally televised game against the Bengals. A player who almost lost his life, or did for a brief second, who we thought lost his career. And one of the stories of the year is the fact that he survived and came back to play, is a player involved in a tackle that may cost another player his career. I mean, that is, I don't know. I'm sure at this point in his life he can frame that, but it's so weird that if this is the end of the career, and we have to talk about that and how that happens. If this is the end of Tua's career, the last tackle was by a guy whose life was almost lost in the same sport. So, yes, I think his career should end. That'd be the smart and practical thing to do. I'm some guy sitting in a studio in Austin, Texas. He doesn't feel that way. He won't feel that way now, and he won't feel that way in a couple days, and he sure the heck won't feel that way in a couple of weeks. There's a lot to this. Okay, so the NFL likely, if they haven't done it yet, will release a statement concerned about his health and monitoring this going forward, blah, 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 something like that. Tua, the player, will probably spin it as it's a slight concussion. I'm fine. I know the protocol. I'm in good care. He'll say something like that. His head coach, who's an interesting guy, a very aware guy who may very well now be in trouble, not because of the concussion, but because they got their ass kicked at home by the Bills in a division game. Mike McDaniel said last night, and it was the right thing to say. I think he handled it perfectly. I think he was. I think he's sincere. Guys in that business don't hate each other the way you think. Guys in that business that are in there on that field all know that your shelf life is short, and they all respect each other for it. So I believe any player, any coach that is trying to back up another player on that field. So I take what he said sincerely. I don't think it's going to matter, and I don't think it should matter to us. But he said, please don't talk about his career right now. But we can't help it. There's no way you can avoid not talking about his career. And I think the average person that doesn't watch NFL football, who's a parent, there's no way they can avoid thinking about this, because you are crazy. If your kid is playing peewee football, you are crazy. Take it in. Okay, so the issue front and center is, what will the NFL do? I mean, forget the player for a second, because I think I can do a decent job of putting you in that spot. It's not as easy to say I'm walking away as you think, and I don't think you will. I don't. What will the NFL, what can the NFL do or say? What could the Players Association do? Can the NFL forcefully retire him? I mean, it's an issue. It is. I mean, you're going to look like hypocrites if you don't, but I don't know how they would do that. I really don't. Can they do it? Would they try to do it? Would they say they've tried to do it? He just signed a giant contract before the season started. A lot of that money is guaranteed. What can and will happen with that deal? He would get paid a lot of it. Not all of it, I don't think, if he were to walk away, tomorrow, a month from now, whatever. Will this change the narrative of kids playing? I think it's going to be talked about again. I do. He ended up stiff on a field a couple of years ago. The exact same thing, the Fincher's pose. When you're concussed, the arms stick out for all sorts of neurological reasons. He ended up like that a couple of times. I said at the time, I believe just after that weekend, I said, he's going to have more concussions, and he and his family have some hard decisions to make. And I got a ton of blowback. A ton. What do you know? What are you talking about? Jerk, jackass, it's his life, blah, 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 blah. I know because I've lived it. I've just seen it. I've lived it. I've seen teammates live it. I've seen teammates die because of it. I was severely, just a quick history. It's nothing to be proud of at all, but this is how complicated the issue is when you're living it, because you don't know. I was severely concussed, I think at the age of 8 or 9, in a terrible accident. I have no idea what happened. To this day, I have no idea what happened. I have no idea what happened during the week. Spent 4 or 5 nights in a hospital. All I remember is waking up one night in a hospital with the pins in my head and pain that I could never imagine. Was there several nights, went on, life goes on, concussed and knocked out completely cold, ended up in a hospital 2 more times playing. This was later, before I was even 17, had 4 concussions before 17. Because one of the times that I was in a hospital, again, completely knocked out to the world, blacked out, and don't remember anything of the week each time, don't remember anything of the day, don't even remember the hit. And the neurologist said, this is a few days later, they did these really basic standard tests, and you're out of it for a while. It doesn't just go away. That post-concussion syndrome is a weird thing. You feel like you're in a dream all the time. You've got muscle memory, but you can't grasp anything mentally. But one of the things, and I repeated this every time concussions come up, one of the things a neurologist said to me was, we don't know the long-term effects. We know it's not good. But we also know this. They're going to keep happening. And they're happening easier and easier to you. Sure enough, that's exactly right. So I thought was probably 17 years old, 16 or 17, probably the 3rd or 4th time in a hospital. And I'm not chosen a different position in college. I was told that I would fail a physical going into the NFL, and that was before we even were hyper aware of concussions. So this was at a time we didn't have as many protocols, but, we were aware it's not good. So, but think about how difficult this is for this guy, because when you're concussed, even repeatedly concussed, in a few days or a few weeks, you feel fine. You're 26, 36, even probably 46, and you're still going to feel fine. And I don't care how careful he is or what kind of training he says he's going to do. I've repeated it many times. You can't play the game without running into each other head on. And you're going to get concussed. And it's going to happen again and again and again. But he's worked at this since he was 10. Imagine this this at any stage in your life when you're really, really good at your job. And it's a craft, and you have worked hard to master this craft. And, whatever the money is good, but it's not everything. You've mastered this. You feel great. You're at your peak. He's 26. And in a few days, even probably tomorrow, he'll be aware enough, and he'll think, I can throw just fine. My body feels fine. I'm a little out of it, but it'll come around, and it will. It will. So just walking away doesn't make any sense. You just, when you're injured a lot, you got a bad knee, or the arm is bad, or the shoulder is bad, and you can't deliver the way you really want to deliver in your craft, you could understand walking away. When you feel perfectly fine, you can't understand walking away. At 26, I can't think of many guys that have. There have been a few. Andrew Luck walked away. He didn't walk away necessarily because of concussions. He walked away because he felt terrible. It hurt all the time. But they're rare, and I think most of you wouldn't walk away. If you were in the exact same spot, I bet you wouldn't walk away. The money and how you feel and the mastery of your craft is just too much. You wouldn't give it up. I think if you just found a way to pull 1,000 people, and I know right now you're saying, this is crazy, Jeff. He could end up and drooling on himself, and he will. I mean, the end is not good. Plenty of us have seen it. I've seen it far too many times. But you can't see 55 at 26. No way. No way. And I think a lot of people said, even if you told me I'd be drooling at 55 and completely incapacitated at 55, I'll bet you a lot of you would still do it. I listened to Mark Schlereth today on Fox. Mark Schlereth played for the Broncos and I think Washington as well, played in the NFL for a long time. I think he said he had 21 surgeries. And he said he would do it all over again. He said he would. I don't think that's typical. I think most players, former players you hear from today are going to say walk away. There is a big difference between limping around. There's a big difference between saying, man, my back is terrible. These guys, all of them hurt all the time. There's a big difference between being in pain and not being able to throw with your kid and not being able to think straight and lying in bed. That's where I think most guys, this is different. Most former players would say, not again. No chance, no way. So I think he knew in the back of his mind we'd be having this discussion. I mean, this discussion would happen again. Notice how many players have come forward and said, you're done, no more. They've seen the effects. They've seen the teammates that die at a young age. They've seen the teammates that have killed themselves at a young age. So it's just, there's a perspective once you're out of the game that there's no way you have it during the game. I think this was on ESPN this morning. It's Ryan Clark who played, where did he play? He played with the Steelers, I think, for several years.
Real, let's bring the people inside the locker room. I'm talk about me. At 30, at 31, at 28, I actually didn't think a lot about what was on the other side. I thought about what was right in front of me. Right. And so many times we make this about money. Right. And don't get me wrong, like we get to change generations of our last name, of our family. Understood. But I played it because I loved it. Right. And I played it the way I played it because I loved it, because I wanted you to know I love it. I wanted Mike Tannenbaum to know I love it. I wanted Dan to know when he wrote about it how much the game meant to me. And think about Tua Tagovailoa. He didn't have a play like that last year. We never walked in here and said to ourselves, he should have slid. We never walked in here and said to ourselves, Tua Tagovailoa can't take that hit, because he continued to protect himself. And he did get the money. And the part about being indebted is, hey, everybody's saying I don't create enough plays. Everybody's saying I don't go above the X's and O's. Well, I got $53 million. I'm going to show you what I could do. I'm going to show you who I am. When I went to Mike Tomlin, I begged to play in Denver. I put a team of doctors around, and my sentence started with, Coach, they say if I'm dying, they can save me. That was my thought. My thought is, if the reason I got so sick last time is because I didn't have these people here and because we weren't prepared. But now I'm prepared to not die. That's what Tua Tagovailoa is going to say. Tua Tagovailoa is going to say, if I'm cleared and you give me an opportunity to play, I want to play. Somebody's going to have to step in for him. Yeah,
exactly what I just said. Who's going to do it? I mean, obviously you would say, if it were you, again, you have a perspective. Everybody is, later in life, you have a perspective. There's no way you would run these risks again. But he can't, as Ryan Clark just explained, he can't think that way. Hell, I was doing it as a teenager for no money. He won't think that way. That business doesn't allow you to think that way. You are in tunnel vision until you can't do it anymore. And it will end badly. I said this the last time. Oh, the blowback. Oh, you don't know. It's going to end badly. If this were your kid, it's going to end badly. That is a terrifying thing about the science of the brain injuries. That those of us that live with it, you wonder, gosh, why not me? Why am I okay? And he's not okay. And these guys that have played, I mean, I had plenty of teammates that have died, plenty that have killed themselves. And the correlation between the levels of depression and CTE are pretty well recorded. The dangers of CTE are pretty well known. I know most of you would say, but these guys knew they were going to do it, Jeff. They knew what they were getting into. Now, yes. In the past, I don't think that's entirely true. But yes, now everyone is very aware. But he's going to feel fine. And he's going to feel like he underachieved. And he threw 3 picks last night. It was awful. He was awful. He's not going to want to walk away. The question is, can the league step in? Should the league step in? Because you know what's going to happen. And they know this. Anyone around the sideline knows this. You're going to see that same look again. You're going to see it again. He's going to get knocked out again, and his arms are going to be sticking out. You're crazy, by the way, there's no upside to kids playing football before they're 14. I'm not sure there's an upside there. There's no upside to hitting each other in the head. Anyone who tells you otherwise is absolutely nuts. They're nuts. There's no upside to it. I don't know how many times I've had this conversation with guys. We all said the same things. Guys that I've played with, man, I would never let my kid do that. But just know this, if your kid's playing, and it doesn't matter the sport, I mean, you're going to see, a lot of the studies, we learned a lot of stuff about CTE because in Europe they were doing studies a long time ago on the levels of CTE with soccer players there. You're going to get hit in the head. It doesn't end well. Repeatedly, it really just doesn't end well. Now, the question is, why would some people, and I knew guys like this and I've been one myself, why would you have so many concussions and then it doesn't flip to a terrible case of CTE? Why would some players who you would think would be in terrible shape later in life are not in terrible shape? And then others don't. I guess therein lies the science of, who's affected by Alzheimer's and who's not. We don't, there's no guarantee he's going to end up like some of his teammates years from now when he's 50 or 55. And some of those guys are going to be so depressed they killed themselves, and some are going to die of CTE, and some are going to be just fine. And nobody knows that science. So he can argue and rationalize in his own mind, I don't know that, there's plenty of guys that are fine. Plenty of old former players that are doing just fine. They've had as many concussions as I have, and he's going to be right about that, and he'll use it to justify playing, I think. The question is, whether you have an opinion, whether you'd want to see it again. I don't think you do. The impact this has in talking points of parents and coaches around the country, whether the organization and or the league can and should step in and say, enough already. I'm not sure they can. They can make a recommendation. But I think you've now seen this guy in an ugly enough pose too often. I think we all can agree you don't want to see him like that again. The question is, how do you get him to stop?